All right, welcome to this week's episode. Today I have Kelsey Voller on, and she is a chronic illness expert with a master's in nutrition and functional medicine for chronic illness. So I, for one, am very, very excited to welcome you, Kelsey, onto our call today because I have struggled with endometriosis and symptoms of undiagnosed Hashimoto's for years and years and years, and you and I both know how the struggle is real when it comes to having undiagnosed or mystery symptoms that aren't normal, but everyone, maybe your labs are in the normal range and your doctors are telling you otherwise. But this work is so powerful and so needed. So I am super, super happy to have you on this podcast today, and would love to have you also go ahead and just let us know a little bit of your story and how you got to where you are today, because I think hearing your story will help other women identify where maybe they are not even aware of the symptoms that they're having, so that they can reclaim their health, their body, their libido, their vitality, their hair, all the things. So without further ado, I would love to hear from you and have you tell us your story of how you came to be where you are today, and take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. So I'm so excited to talk today because I was the kind of woman that was really in tune with my body as a kid. I think a lot of women can relate to this, really in tune with my body. And doctor visit after doctor visit throughout my teens, when things were going wrong, I kept being told that I was fine. You're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And slowly over time, this disconnect happened where I was no longer trusting myself, no longer sure, am I feeling this? Am I making it up? Is this in my head? Is this just anxiety? And so I'm so excited to talk because I think there are so many other women out there who have a similar story to mine, and it breaks my heart that that's true. But just from working with hundreds of clients at this point, I hear this every day from women that I'm working with. So how I got to where I got, working with people with chronic illness, helping people to reclaim their health, using the medical medium information, it all came from my own healing story. And frankly, it was a long, hard, expensive, and emotionally draining experience for me. It wasn't like, oh, I got sick and then 10 months later I got better. No, I had a really, really long journey to finding what works. I was throwing spaghetti at the wall for so many years before I figured out exactly what root causes were really at play for me, and then how to resolve those root causes and get my life back. So I'm super excited to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool because I found you through the medical medium on Instagram, and I saw that you had healed endometriosis and Hashimoto's, and I was like, oh my God, this is like a godsend, because that's what I'm going through right now. And like you, I spent the last 15 years spending tens of thousands of dollars on doctors and supplements and different things, and my own nutrition coaching program, literally just trying to figure out what the fuck was going on with my body, and wasn't getting any results. I would go to doctors, they'd tell me I was fine. I would get, vaginal ultrasounds, and they'd be like, nothing's wrong. And it was just infuriating and devastating and depressing. And you kind of feel crazy, like when you're doing these things, you're just like, how can I be in this much pain and having people tell me that nothing's wrong, or to just get on the pill or have a hysterectomy to like make it go away when it actually doesn't address the problem. So I would love to hear, if you don't mind sharing, your personal story of like symptoms, or just like how you kind of discovered or found your way through all this, because it is a long road for a lot of us that don't know, and it's trial and error, and it's really discouraging when you don't know what's wrong and you're going to people, doctors who you think are supposed to know how to help fix you, and they don't. And so I would really love to hear your personal journey, if you don't mind sharing that.
Absolutely. Because mine is so long and there are so many symptoms, it's almost It's almost humorous. It's not humorous, but it's almost humorous how long my symptom list is. I'm gonna give you the highlights. So when I was about 13, I was still pretty connected to my body. And I remember telling my mom, there's something wrong with my thyroid. I don't feel right. We went to the doctor, they did the labs, everything's fine, you're fine. And of course, in my head, I'm going, then why don't I feel fine? You know, it was really confusing to me. I ended up bringing that up every year throughout high school. Something's wrong with my thyroid. And we would go in and get it checked, and they would say, you're fine. You're fine. Nothing's wrong. All looks good. Your labs are perfect. By my senior year of high school, I ended up having a really, really intense case of mononucleosis. My eyes were super puffy. I was sleeping all day, all night. And it really didn't ever leave. It got a little bit better, but it never left. It wasn't like, oh, I was sick for a week, like when you get the flu and then you're better. I got the mono and things just started to pile up after that. So fast forward a few more years, and I'm now getting all kinds of autoimmune diagnoses. So interstitial cystitis, rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, you know, and colitis, endometriosis. The list was growing every time I went to the doctor. I actually got to the point where I was like, I don't want to go to the doctor because they just keep giving me more labels, which would be fine if there was a solution provided for me with this label. But what I kept hearing was, actually, there's nothing you can do about this except manage it with medications for the rest of your life. It's going to keep progressively getting worse the rest of your life. And I'm sitting here at 20 years old going, I'm 20. What's my life and my quality of life going to look like by 30 and 40? This is really, really scary. And one of the things that was kind of a pivotal moment for me is with my thyroid diagnosis. They said, yep, you have thyroid disease, right? And I'm going, I've been telling you guys this for how many years?
Yeah.
And what I did is I looked back at all my lab tests from, 13 all the way up to where I got my diagnoses. And while my labs were in range, right? Because you have a range of, it should be from this to this with your TSH. My TSH was going up, 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 up every year. But it wasn't out of range until that time when I went in and they said, oh, now you have a thyroid problem. And I'm like, okay, this makes no sense to me. If I was feeling these symptoms and they were just amplifying over years and years and years, why is it that all of a sudden I just have a thyroid issue, right? It's like, no.
Yeah.
The thyroid issue was building. You guys just weren't acknowledging it until it became a big enough fire for it to be out of range and worth putting a label to, And what was really hard for me emotionally at that point was going, what if we would address this when I was 13? Would I be in the same boat that I'm in now? Would it be this hard right now? It was really, really hard. So I'm 20 years old. I'm getting all these diagnoses. At first, I'm all excited to go to the best of the best doctors. I go to the Center for Celiac Disease, and I go to all these specialists, and I'm thinking, you know what? They're going to have the answers. They did tons of labs, got tons of blood work done, and I'm like, we're going to get this. And really, I was so heartbroken when I got to those appointments and found out that actually there was no answers. There was no resolution. There was no solution provided. It was just, well, we can manage this. With the interstitial cystitis, it was, well, we know that your pain is excruciating. We can do a pain pump. We can insert a pain pump into you. I'm like, that's not a solution. That's a Band-Aid, right? Yeah. And so at that point, I realized that conventional medicine wasn't going to have all the answers for me. I wanted it to. I really wanted it to. But what I saw with, the thyroid situation and with the solutions that I was provided was that, conventional medicine is amazing for emergency care, for a broken leg, for any surgery you need to have done. They are amazing with that. What they're not so great with are these chronic symptoms, these things that slowly build up, and these mystery symptoms. So I realized at that point that I had to take my healing into my own hands if I was going to get better. And I didn't know if I could get better. But at that point, I actually was so sick. I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I was so sick that I could no longer work. There were days where I couldn't get out of bed. There's days where I woke up and my limbs, especially my legs, literally felt like they were full of concrete. Like they were so heavy. And, you know, I remember a few times literally crawling across the floor to get to the bathroom, just not having the strength to walk, which was really, really scary. So at that point, it was like, I know where this is heading and it's not a good direction. I'm going to need to look at this myself and really figure this out. And for me, I ended up, you know, doing a lot of training, going to a lot of different courses, eventually went to graduate school and studied chronic illness and the root causes of chronic illness, so that literally so I could just apply it to myself. And what I told myself is, Kels, if you can get better, you'll help other people. But let's give this, you know, all I've got, because this is literally life and death for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what I feel like so many women that listen to this are going to resonate on some level or another, because I'm sitting over here like nodding my head like, oh, I've been there. I get it. Cause it's like the worst when you have that chronic fatigue and it's like, people are just like, you're just being lazy, or you just need to like get it together. You know, like people who haven't been through it really don't understand how debilitating a lot of these symptoms are. And when you've spent all that money trying to figure it out and going to the lengths of like your own education, trying to figure it out, it's just, this is such a gift for women to hear, to be able to be like, oh, I've totally felt that. And will you also say more on like when you were a kid and were like, something's wrong with my thyroid? Did you have any like tingling or like any kind of things you remember specifically that you kind of like had an inkling that something was wrong?
You know, so I think it was even more than just my thyroid. I know it was more than my thyroid looking back on my history. There were so many little things that at the time I didn't know were signs that my body was dysfunctional, that there were problems building and brewing, and there was a fire building. The reason I didn't know is because they're not talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody talks about bowel movements. Nobody, you know, in kindergarten, they should be like, this is what a normal bowel movement should look like, right?
Yeah.
But nobody talks about it. So you don't know what's normal. You think the way that you feel must be how everybody else feels. So for me, some of the symptoms that were my first yellow flags before things really built up: constipation. I was going to the bathroom once a week. And really, a healthy body should be having a banana-shaped bowel movement every single day, if not a couple times a day. Things should be moving through. The abdomen should be nice and flat, right? After I would eat, I would get bloated and I would get tired. And I thought that was normal. I thought it was normal to need, like, to want to take a nap or need to take a nap after a meal. That is absolutely not normal. You should feel the exact same way that you felt before a meal, after a meal, just more satiated, right? With my thyroid, when I would try to sing, because I was in choir, when I would try to sing, it felt like someone was kind of like squeezing my throat. Like it wasn't open, right? And that led later on to even more pressure in the throat. My hair, which, you know, I had grown out my hair for Locks of Love and donated 12 inches. Like my hair was always strong and long and great. Became like just straw. I mean, it would crunch when you would push on it. And it was thin and just kind of stringy. Wads of it were falling out in the shower. That was an issue. My sleep changed. I mean, I never remember as a little kid even thinking about sleep. Sleep just happened. I mean, it wasn't even, you know, there was no concern around sleep. But all of a sudden it was really hard to fall asleep. And it was like, you know, I would be up and doing things and kind of groggy and tired, and then 9 p.m. would hit and I'd get this second wave of energy, and it'd be, you know, midnight, 1, 2 a.m. before I could wind down enough to fall asleep. For me also, my weight. So the first thing that happened was all of a sudden I was gaining a lot of weight, and it was stubborn. It wasn't like I was eating more. It wasn't like I was exercising less. It was like, okay, nothing's different. Why is my weight changing? So my weight was going up, up, up. Even when I exercised more and I cut back on my eating, it still went up. I actually, even did intermittent fasting, for 2 years. Weight just kept going up. And then at a certain point, because for me, I went hyper and hypo. I had an extreme weight drop. So I went from a size, 8 to a 00 in about a month, which is pretty extreme.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And during that time, and looking back, I can link it all now. Back then I just felt overwhelmed, but at the same time I was getting panic attacks. And it wasn't that I was scared of something. It wasn't that I was worked up about something in particular. It was just it was like my body was just so high strung all of a sudden. The littlest things would overwhelm me. And, I would start breathing fast. I'd start sweating. And like I said, I would have a panic attack. I, got to the point where, I had insomnia, or I wouldn't be able to fall asleep till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So there were a lot of signs that there was dysfunction in my body. But unfortunately, I was never taught to notice these signs and to know what they were telling me, right? We're not taught this. It should be a fundamental thing that you learn kindergarten on, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't. And another really big one was my periods. My mom had really horrendous periods. She had a fibroid the size of a tennis ball. She had, her uterus ablated. And so when I went through my periods, when I first got my period at 13, normal period, meaning there was no pain, there was no bad cramping, no PMS. It just kind of came, and it was there for maybe 2 days, and then it left. But by the time I was 16, my periods became horrendous, to the point that I remember laying on the floor when the cramps hit me. One time I was in the kitchen with my mom, and the cramps started. And usually when I would get my period, all of a sudden my gut would just swell up. My uterus area all the way up would just swell, until it literally swelled so far that I thought I was going to have stretch marks. Like, it hurt. It literally hurt my skin. So that would happen. And then the horrible cramps would set in, and I just dropped to the floor. Whenever this happened, I would drop to the floor. And I remember laying on the floor in the kitchen, looking up at my mom, and I said, I can't do this. Just punch me. Like, punch me and knock me out. There was no painkillers that we tried that touched the pain. And I just wanted to be knocked out, because I was like, I can't handle this, that level of pain. And, and I've had some pretty intense pain in my life. I grew up on a farm. It's like, if there's no blood, if there's no bone, like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
This was a different type of pain. It was just horrendous. And, and my periods got really heavy. There was a lot of clotting. I started having PMS the week before my period. I was really emotional, moody, up and down, hyperglycemia issues, blood sugar issues, acne, really, coming out on my face. There were so many things starting to happen with my period. And for some reason, just because I saw so many other women having these issues, I thought it was maybe how periods were. Maybe that's kind of normal. I didn't question it at the time.
Yeah. And I'm like, I just relate so much to all of this, because again, with the periods, I've had a same thing, but mine from 13 on has been horrific. And, when people are like, oh, you're just having a bad period, it's like, no, it's a different level of pain. Like, if you're taking painkillers and you're just nauseous and it actually doesn't help with the cramps, it's hard to explain it to people. Like, my mom had never had bad periods. So she never took me to the doctor, because she thought I was just trying to get out of school. And and our family is just kind of like that, my side of the family is just a little bit more like, oh, you only go to the doctor if you're like bleeding or something's broken, kind of a thing. Like, it's just old school, right?
Really
yeah. It's like farm life, old school kind of thing. And that's where I'm actually still dealing with those, where so I'm gonna have to hire you, Kelsey. And, but it's just this place where when you do go to doctors and people are just telling you, like, I went on birth control and it actually did not help. It didn't help anything.
I was put on birth control too, and it literally made it worse.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Because of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, when it's so discouraging, and I haven't given up yet either. I'm like, I know this is not normal. I know that this needs to change. And it's, for any woman listening to this that has struggled with this, it's like knowing that it can be different, knowing that there is hope, knowing that you can take the reins back on your health. And that's why I really wanted to have you on, Kelsey, just, selfishly for my own, like wanting to hear more about this too, but just getting a platform for women to know about these symptoms and to know they're not normal, and to know that most doctors probably aren't going to have solutions. They're going to have Band-Aids. And finding functional integrative medicine practitioners or nutritionists that have either healed it on their own, like their own journey, that have that experience and that knowledge, but just really making sure that you really get to like interview and know the practitioners and the doctors that you're going in to see, because for your own time and money and emotional well-being. I've sat in, University of Washington in Seattle, went in and they were like, if you're in as much pain as you say you're in, we just cannot understand why you won't get on the pill. Or like actual shaming from doctors, well-meaning, I'm sure, but I would cry. Like, I just felt so hopeless. I'm like, you're supposed to be the one that's supposed to help me fix this. You're the one with the fancy degree. Like, you're the doctor. And so, for any woman listening, just like, my hope is like in hearing this, that that there are people like Kelsey out there. There are people that have healed this on their, like, in their own journey and in their own education, and just knowing that chronic fatigue, having any of the symptoms that you've heard in this podcast so far around, it's not normal. And you do have avenues for taking your health back. And with that, Kelsey, I would love for you to share like what your healing experience was through your own education, and then finding the medical medium, and and just share what your experience was like of taking your own health back and what that looked like for you.
Yeah. So I want to share this because honestly, like I said, my journey was really long, arduous. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of money honestly spent and wasted. And if this can help you save some of that, that would make my day. So here's the thing. I'm a science girl. My bachelor's is in biology. I was a science teacher before I got really ill. And my master's in nutrition and functional medicine for chronic illness. I'm a science person. I wanted science to have all my answers. That's why I went to conventional medicine. When they didn't have the answers for me, I moved on to functional medicine, MDs and NDs. And yes, some of the information that they gave me was helpful, and I did make little bits of progress, but it was kind of like whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
This thing's getting better, but now I'm having this issue. Like I was a pre-diabetic at 20 years old, and I was literally by, I think, 24, I was right on the line with being diagnosed as a diabetic. Like they didn't want to, because they're like, what the heck? I was doing paleo and low glycemic index, low glycemic foods. I was doing low FODMAP. I was doing everything that's supposed to work, and I was getting worse. So I went from conventional medicine to functional medicine, did as much. I was the perfect patient. I'm sure you can relate to this too. I remember saying this to one of my doctors. I said, if you tell me to just eat ketchup for a year and only ketchup, and that will heal me, I will do it.
Yeah, like I'm that way too. I'm like, just fucking tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what I heard time and time again, I would do their protocol perfectly, 100% all in for a year, year and a half, 2 years. And they'd be like, this is weird. It usually works for other people. I don't know why it's not working for you. And that was pretty heartbreaking, to keep hearing over and over again, wow, you're a really complex case. Wow, this seems to work for everybody. I'm not sure why it's not working for you. We don't know what else to do for you. Okay, so then I went to alternative medicine and homeopathy. And, I did the Gerson protocol, which is pretty intense.
Really intense.
I did vegan. There's literally so many things. AIP, autoimmune paleo diet. I did so many things. I did them, hardcore, 100%. And like I said, made little gains, but did not get my life back, could not work full time. There'd be bouts of 3 months where I couldn't get out of bed. And then every time my period came, there's no way I could work.
Yeah.
So it was when I found the medical medium information, I was like, I don't want to look at that because I was a science girl and I was like, a medium? I don't want to read no medium, like
that's a bunch of BS. Yeah. Yeah.
But honestly, I had to look at it and have an honest conversation with myself and say, Kels, you've tried everything that's available science-wise. Just open up the book. Just open it up. So I opened up the first medical medium book. At the time, I think that was the only one that was published, and started reading it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this book, all the things that had worked for me in the past, 8 years of trial and error, the things that had worked for me, he was describing them in his book. And the things that weren't working for me, that they had said, oh, this will work for you, and it absolutely did not work for me, like birth control.
Yeah.
He was noting all of those in the book, saying this doesn't work and here's why. And it was just light bulb after light bulb went off. When I was in grad school, I realized that I had toxic heavy metal issues, and I went and got myself tested. I had really high arsenic. I'm like, let's check my mom's well water. We checked the well water. It was 3 times higher than the safe max. So it was triple what it could be and be safe. I knew I had heavy metal issues. Then I go and I read in his book, and he's like, one of the main reasons for these symptoms that, I was having is toxic heavy metals. I was like, yes, you get it, So it was aha moment after aha moment. I read the book in a day, literally in a day, because as I'm reading through it, I'm going, yes, 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 yes. This is, I was still very, very apprehensive. My science brain, of course, right? Like you put up walls after a while, after going through all of this.
Yes.
I was looking for if there's anything that was wrong, or anything where I was like, oh no, that was not my experience, or that's not, definitely not right. Couldn't find any of that. So after reading the book, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. I'm just going to give it a try for a month. But oh my gosh, my fruit fear was so intense because I was a pre-diabetic, right? And I was terrified that I was going to need to go on, diabetic medication. Because my fasting insulin, my fasting glucose, my HbA1c, all these markers for blood sugar regulation were really bad and getting worse every year. So I had some real fruit fear. And, one of the things he talked about in the book was doing the heavy metal detox smoothie. And this smoothie has 2 cups of wild blueberries, 2 bananas, a cup of orange juice, some cilantro, and some green powders. I was terrified of 2 bananas because everything that I had learned, I had really bad SIBO. If I ate a little bit of fruit, I bloated up. So my thinking, based on what I had heard, on blogs and on the internet, was that fruit, fruit was bad for me. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to try it for a month. If I start, nose diving, then I'll stop. So of course the scientist in me, I had all my labs checked before I started this experiment. And by the end of the first month, I had one piece of positive feedback that just totally changed my life. And that was, I had chronic yeast infections almost continuously since I was about 11 years old. The only times I didn't have a yeast infection was when I was on antifungals, nystatin or whatever. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got into my 20s, not even doing antifungals was fully taking them away. So 1 month into doing fruit smoothies, right, the heavy metal detox smoothie, and my chronic yeast infections were gone. I was just mind blown.
Yeah, you're like, what? Yeah.
It wasn't like a fluke, right? It's like, no, this has consistently been an issue for over a decade. So I was like, okay, here's a signal from my body that whatever I'm doing here is working, is helping. And from that point, I built up more of the, the medical medium information into my lifestyle, reducing my fats, increasing my fruit intake, being really thoughtful about how often I was eating, about my hydration, and bringing things in like celery juice and cucumber juice, and really looking at my symptoms, pointing them back to the root cause, and using that information specific to me to know exactly which supplements were most appropriate for me. And that changed month by month. Which juices were most important to me. That changed month by month. There was a time where I was really focusing on my endo. That looked different than when I was really focusing on my thyroid and was able to get off my thyroid medication. So it was step by step, and it was really guided by my unique symptom list and what symptoms were worse, and how my bowel movements were, what my sleep was looking like. All of that helped me. Those were clues that said, hey, you need to focus more on antivirals. Hey, you need to focus more on strep support. You need to focus more on MSG removal. The feedback my body was giving me was guiding me. It just took me 10 years to learn how to listen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one, especially in our culture. Women are taught to do anything and everything other than listen to their own bodies. And it's almost an art in the way of when something's signaling to you, when whether that's emotionally, physically, like when you are having symptoms of something, your body is actually speaking to you. So it's your body's, because we are very versed in our mental intellect of articulating with words, like we're not super articulate in communicating with our body's feedback. So that is like if you're having ringing in your ears, like tinnitus, out of nowhere, it could be from a viral infection or stress, or it's like, or the chronic UTIs, it could be whether it's a viral or emotional thing, but yeah, or even just with partners. But it's a process of learning. And with that being said, when I know a lot of women hear about like starting to do this work of listening to their own body, they might feel really overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I already have all these symptoms, and now I'm supposed to like know, like, oh, my UTIs mean I need to take out MSGs, or like they might get like like a little bit overwhelmed. So what, in that case, where would you have most people start in either integrating in celery juice or medical medium stuff, or getting their labs checked, or different like things that they could do like today or this week to start really taking their own control back over their body and learning how to listen to it?
Yeah, great question. So I think the biggest thing is, don't expect yourself to figure it all out on this week or tonight or this month even, or maybe even this year. What you want to do, and this is what I do with my clients, is you want to focus on the feedback that's really clear to you. You might not know all of it, but there's going to be one or two pieces that you can pick up on every week. So maybe you say, on Sundays I spend 20 minutes on my calendar, I spend 20 minutes reflecting on what I noticed from my body this week. What really stood out to me? Did I poop every day? When did I fall asleep, and how was my sleep? After I ate a meal, how did I feel? Did I feel fatigued? Did I get bloated? Did I get gurgles? Did I get gassy? Those are things that you want to look at. And I want you to just write down the things that you clearly noticed that were off, that didn't feel good. And so write those down once a week, and you're going to eventually have a pretty long list that you can look at. And you're going to find common themes on that list. And this is what I teach in my online course. This is actually what we teach in module 1, is you take that list of symptoms, and what you do then is you relate them back to root causes. And you might have a list of 50, 100 different symptoms, little ones, big ones, medium ones. You might have this list of 50 to 100. But what you're going to see is they're going to come back to probably around 5 to 10 root causes. And when you categorize them by root cause, and we do this on the root cause map, when you categorize them by root cause, you start to see a pattern. You start to see a theme where it's like, you know what? Out of my 50 symptoms, 25 of them seem to be viral. seem to be related to, probably an Epstein-Barr virus strain, or related to a non-rashing shingles virus strain, whatever that might be. But you're going to pick up on a theme. And when you have that theme, it helps you to prioritize what kind of support your body needs most. So that's that's a lot to do. And you got to go through all the medical medium books where you can find that information on each of those symptoms and the root causes. It's kind of spread out amongst all the books, the podcast, which is why I do the course that I do, because it's just a lot of information to go through. Yeah. But if you just wanted to start taking care of your body a little bit better today, what could you do right now? I would say 3 things would be really helpful. Number 1 would be your fat intake. There's totally, just because I've been working on my health for so long, I've seen fads come and go and come and go and be recycled. Yeah. Fat absolutely has its place, but if you are someone struggling with chronic illness issues, you are different from this, athletic 20-year-old healthy person on Instagram who's doing keto. Okay. You're different. Your body's needs are different.
Your body's different.
Your body's different. So bringing down your fat intake is going to help your liver to function better, which is going to help the rest of your body function better. Your liver makes bile. Bile breaks down fats. When your liver's stressed out with a lot of toxicity, which is behind most of chronic illness, you're not helping yourself out by eating more fats. So the first thing I would do would be to do fat-free mornings. You wake up in the morning, have a smoothie, and don't put peanut butter in it. Don't put, nuts in it, just fruits and veggies and some coconut water or some orange juice, but make yourself a fat-free breakfast and wait on your fats until noon. The second thing that I would do is I would look at how frequently you're eating. If you're eating or drinking something with healthy glucose in it, with healthy sugars, I know sugar gets this terrible name. Your body runs on sugar. It runs on glucose. If you're eating, a piece of fruit or, some potatoes or something like that, every 2 hours, you're going to keep your blood sugar so much more regulated. And if you keep your blood sugar regulated, everybody else in your body is happier. Your adrenals are happier, your liver's happier. They're all so interconnected. If you're not eating every 2 hours, there's extra work for those other organs to do. Just that's the way it is. That's why certain people can do intermittent fasting and get great results, because they don't have issues going on in all of those organs. But if you do, which people with chronic illness do have issues going on in those organs, doing things like intermittent fasting and keto are just going to amplify your symptoms over time, because you're just adding more work on the plate of those organs. So that'd be the second. So the first, fat-free mornings, reducing the stress on your liver. The second would be eating every 2 hours. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could be a bite of an apple. If you're not hungry, just get a bite of something in to keep your blood glucose nice and even. The third thing that I would do would be to bring out the biggest trouble foods. And these are ones, seriously, I've seen these, thinking about women with PCOS, endometriosis, thyroid issues, panic attacks, anxiety, depression, interstitial cystitis, what else? Rheumatoid arthritis. Those are the type of people where taking out gluten, dairy, eggs, soy, and corn is game changer, huge game changer. Just taking out those 5 foods to start with, those are fuel for the type of fires that come up with chronic illness. So I would take those out.
I love that. This is such good information. And I know for me personally, I did that piecing of when I was figuring out the cramping that I was having. And there were certain times, when I traveled in India and when I traveled in Bali, where I didn't have any cramps. And I was like, what was it about those times and my diet? Cause that's the only thing. And it was I ate more turmeric, because turmeric was in everything that I ate basically in those places. And I wasn't eating as much gluten. And so I was everything I'd read about Hashimoto's, cause at the time I was actually more focused on Hashimoto's, it was take gluten out. when I took gluten out, I stopped having cramps. And I was like, I'm Italian. So people are like, I can't believe that you don't eat, you know, bread. And I'm like, if you had the cramps that I had with my period, you would understand. Like, it is literally not worth it. And so these, while some people might have a really hard time, especially with like eggs and gluten, being like, I don't want to take those out. Those are like my main staple, especially for breakfast or different things. But getting to experiment with this for a month and just being like, what would it feel like for me to take out dairy or eggs or whatever for a month, and just to see what my body feels like. And coming at this from an approach of curiosity, and getting to implement the things that Kelsey just said, because it is learning how to speak the language of your bodies. And for me, I never in a million years would have tied my gluten intake to the cramps that I was having, because it was later in the month. I didn't get sick when I ate gluten. I maybe got a little bit of brain fog and fatigue, but didn't, you know, I was just like, oh, I just ate too much or something. But the cramps that I was having were directly tied into the gluten. And so I love that you touched on all of those, because they're so important. And yeah, with that being said, I would love to know, and for you to share, how women can find you, what platforms you're on, and anything one-to-one or courses you have coming up that you want people to know about, and that you're excited about, and all of that information that you can share for them to find you.
Yeah. So the place that I'm most active is on Instagram. So you can find me at Heal with Kelsey, Kelsey. Heal with Kelsey on Instagram. You can DM me. I'm on my stories almost every day. And sharing a lot on Fridays. I do a Q&A every single Friday, so you can ask questions there. So you can find me on Instagram. You can also find me on my website, and it's just healwithkelsey.com. And you feel free to email me if you have any questions about working with me. And then lastly, I do have an online course. I only run it twice a year. And it's just what I was describing before. There's 6 modules in it. We go for, identifying your root causes, mapping those out on a root cause map, then figuring out which priorities you need to focus on first, figuring out your foundational protocol, what that needs to look like for you. It's all very specific based on your root cause map, and then it just gets more and more specific as you go step by step through the process. So that's something you can learn more about on Instagram at healwithkelsey.com, either place.
Awesome. Well, I know that people listening to this will absolutely benefit from it and start their healing journey. So thank you so much for coming on and spending this time with me today, Kelsey. It was really a pleasure.
Absolutely, Nicole. It was awesome to speak to you.